I think the policy mistake was leaving interest rates at zero, right? Emergency levels when there was no emergency. Back in 2009, there was an emergency. We had the global financial crisis. Cutting rates to zero made sense. By 2013, we were recovered, but we kept interest rates at zero. But why did we keep interest rates at zero? Now, I have a question. Daniel, have you ever borrowed at Fed funds? I haven't. I never get to borrow at Fed funds. I have to borrow at prime or at a credit card rate or at a mortgage rate. Who borrows at Fed funds? The banks. Well, why do the banks get to borrow at Fed funds? Well, here's what they do. The Treasury in the United States and other places, US, Europe and Japan, has this problem. Massive amounts of debt. Massive amounts of debt. They can't pay it back. Right? If you taxed all the wealth in the United States, you couldn't pay back the debt. You can't restructure it because no one would take the other side. Well, in fact, the Japanese and the Chinese are selling US Treasuries. You can't default on it because, then if you're a politician, you lose your job. So what do? You devalue it. So what do? You print more money to devalue the debt. But the real problem is all of that debt is causing this incessant desire to keep interest rates really low because the only buyers of debt have been the banks and the central banks. And so here's what they do. The banks borrow from the central banks at zero, and then they buy treasuries at 2-3%, and they lock those in. They lever them up 11 or 12 times and have a riskless trade. Think about that. JP Morgan had 0 negative trading days last year. How is that possible? Who could be that perfect at trading? Well, they're not trading. They're arbitraging. They're borrowing at zero and buying treasuries. Riskless trade. So that was refortifying the balance sheets of the banks that had been destroyed in a global financial crisis. So they kept that on too long because it was really good. The Fed was happy, the banks were happy, the executives were happy, the management teams were happy. And then they passed crazy tax legislation to basically say, you large companies, we'll cut your taxes if you do this. How about you buy back your own stock and increase the price of the stock, even though your earnings are flat? And then the people at the top get really rich. So what's happened over the last, really since 1913, and really exacerbated since the global financial crisis, is there's been this giant sucking sound. And that's not jobs going to Mexico. That is the money being sucked up from the middle class and the masses to the very tippy top. Not even the 1%, the 0.1%. And that is the job of the Fed. Everyone thinks the Fed is price stability and job. No. The job of the Fed is to steal money from the masses and give it to the people at the top through this thing we call inflation. Inflation is a hoax. There's no reason that prices should go up. From 1776, when we formed the Republic, to 1913, the price of $1 was $1. Now, why do we even call it $1? Because we borrowed the idea from the Netherlands, from the Rothschild family. The Rothschilds run everything in the world, and they called it the dollar in the Bank of the Dutch National Bank. So we took the dollar, called it the dollar, and from 1776 to 1913, the dollar was worth $1. There was no inflation because we didn't have a central bank to create money out of thin air. Since 1913, as Jay Leno quipped, I heard they were going to make a dollar coin. Well, they already have one. It's called a nickel. So we turned $1 into 5 cents over the last 100 plus years. And so this constant theft, and inflation is theft, as is taxation, this constant theft of wealth from the average person to the elites is the plan. And the more people try to subvert attention away from that and focus on things like inflation and lockdowns and all these other crazy policies, they're missing the primary objective, which is the average person's quality of life is going down.
Absolutely.
Right? We have the widest income and wealth inequality in the history of mankind. Right? It's never been worse. Now people say, but we've taken all these people out of poverty. True. We took them out of abject poverty and we put them in a class where they have to be solely dependent on the government through handouts. Right? What did they just do in Canada? They just sent people money. Why did they send them money? Well, so they would vote for the people that, if you asked them, they'd say, I hate these guys. Well, then why do you vote for them? Well, because I want to get my free money. And that has been the dictator playbook since the beginning of time.